the high, the dopamine hit, whatever you want to call it, that I get off of making other people happy and maybe even anticipating their needs and doing things that they don't expect to be done for them, to them, the high that I get off that is it's unmatched and it's addictive. And frankly, I've wanted to stay in that space forever.
Today's guest is Brandon Barton, CEO of Byte, an AI-driven self-service platform revolutionizing the quick service and fast casual restaurant industry. We dive into Brandon's career consistently at the intersection of hospitality and technology, spanning from his early days at Danny Meyer's Union Square Hospitality Group to leading sales at Resy before its acquisition with American Express. We explore Byte's innovation, including their work with Shaquille O'Neal's Big Chicken brand and how AI is revolutionizing the restaurant industry. Let's start the show. Brandon, it's been too long. Thank you for being on. I'm super stoked to dive in here.
Oh, it's Marcus. Great to see you, and super excited to be here, man.
So, as I'm not going to use the word former because I think we're still basketball players. There was a big intro, I understand, that I caught wind of on LinkedIn between at least one basketball player and another head of a professional sports league. And I'm wondering if you might just share with us two big men in their own respective industries.
There you go.
Dana White and Shaquille O'Neal. I want to hear how you met them and what that story is all about.
Yeah, that's it's actually all related. I don't know. Maybe this will come up a couple times in our conversation, but yeah, luck favors the prepared person, right? And so this all came together because of a lot of hustle and a lot of hard work, but really grateful to have met the Big Chicken team. So Big Chicken is Shaquille O'Neal's family's brand. Years ago, Shaquille O'Neal was involved with Papa John's. I don't know if he's divested those units or not, but I know he eventually felt, the story goes that he eventually felt like that's not his and it's not representing what his upbringing was. He's a huge family guy. Nearly everything he had to say, when I met him for that 45-minute period, he was talking about some story about his father and the way his father taught him something and what he's teaching to his kids. It's lovely. Anyway, he started this brand Big Chicken with his business partner Perry, and Big Chicken, through a series of hard work and fortunate events, chose Byte, my current company. Byte is, for those of you that don't know, is a self-service kiosk company. We utilize amazing AI to help predict what people want and put the best options in front of them. But if you've walked into a QSR or a fast casual restaurant in the last few years, you've probably seen a kiosk, and many of them might have been Byte, especially in California. Anyway, back to the story. Got to meet Josh and the team, and there was this opportunity to try to infuse Shaq into the kiosk. And there is nobody. I think this is actually true. I don't think that there is anyone that's more memeable for our generation, and I'm including straight down to the Zers and everything, okay, than Shaq. Shaq is hysterical. Shaq doing anything because he's a 300 and probably 60-pound man. If he shakes his butt or does a chicken dance, that's hysterical. And so we had the opportunity to put this into our kiosk product. I sat in Las Vegas for an afternoon and watched just random people use the kiosk. Everybody walked away laughing. And anyway, this all led to being able to meet Shaq in person, have a conversation with him, tell him about the kiosk, show him his family, Lucille's famous mac and cheese. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have met this guy because he's incredible. There's this concept of what is a celebrity really like. He's better than whatever you think he is, because he is just an incredible human being.
That's such a great story. So how did you so I know you guys met and you put him in your kiosk. Like, what was the genesis of that? How did that come about?
So I'll give a little bit of credit to the PR company that we started working with. They opened my eyes to this thing that I may not have realized in the earlier years of me being a CEO, which is sometimes you have to build product that is newsworthy. And we were so focused and have been so focused on building product that is really functionally what our customers want. But we probably in the early years had not spent enough time dreaming about what the customers don't realize that they want and building it. And so I had this idea to make a newsworthy feature, which is the secret menu. Everyone's been to an In-N-Out and you've ordered something animal style and you feel cool. I remember when somebody showed me you can do that, and I felt cool. You know, and it becomes a part of the lore. And I said, let's do a secret menu. So again, good, luck favors the prepared person here. Got a phone call from Josh Halpern, who's the CEO of Big Chicken. Then the next day, I got a phone call from Perry Rogers. Perry Rogers is there's incredible stories with Perry, and I'd hate to tell his story here, but let's just say he has had three basically top performing athletes as an agent of three different top performing athletes throughout his career: Andre Agassi, Shaquille O'Neal, and Jason Tatum. Okay, he's only had three clients because he's not really an agent. He's like a businessman who also was best friends with Andre Agassi when he was little, so he became his agent. And anyway, the stories from Perry are amazing. Anyway, when somebody like that calls you and says, "Hey, I want to infuse Shaq into this experience," um, it was very meaningful. And he said, we're doing this photo shoot with Pepsi where we have a day where we're going to have Shaq and his family, his daughter, his mother there, and they're going to be doing all these little gifts, and we want to put this in the kiosk. And I said, bingo, I have the best idea. Let's make the Shaq secret menu. Okay. And we ended up calling it the O'Neal family menu. And we took this idea that I had about how to productize something really special in the secret menu, and how to put Shaq into it. And I said, this is perfect. So we did the photo shoot with Shaq, got all these funny gifts, and then put it into the product. And so really, this was about how do we create a experience inside a restaurant that could be fun and make people smile. And it was a perfect alignment of brand and celebrity and everything that led to it. And by the way, super props to my product and engineering team who took my little dream and said, we can actually do that, and made it happen.
That's there aren't many people that have a story like that where your phone rings like that, but I think that's a testament to what you've built over time. I want to dive into Byte and hear a little bit more about that, but I'm a little bit curious before we do that. And I also have a slew of questions about the future of the restaurant industry,
Yeah,
how AI infuses into that, because I think there's a lot of
sure,
theoretical right now that you're on the
sure,
on the front lines being able to witness. But
sure.
I think it'd be interesting to sort of dive in. You got a hospitality degree,
Yeah, I did.
so and I know you've had a few rungs up the ladder before Byte came around. Walk
Yeah,
us through sort of post graduation, because you and I went to school together in
yes.
within different colleges, but we went
I
to
was.
same
I thought you. Were, I
university.
thought you were about to say. I thought you were about to say the year. Don't say the year.
No,
People
no
don't need to
chance,
know.
no chance. Don't worry about that.
All right.
So, uh, once we graduated, I never look. I mean, I grew up and I knew if there was really 4 or 5 things you could be: a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, maybe a police officer, fire department, something like that. Had I known I could have
Yeah.
gone into law and not been a lawyer, the whole world would have opened up to me. So my purview was pretty limited when I was in high school. It expanded obviously in college. Graduating with a hospitality degree, I just assumed people went into hotels. I mean, that was
Yeah.
really my
Yeah.
limited knowledge. What did you walk away from that education, and sort of tell me about what steps you took following that?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. I mean, you should know. I don't know if you know this, but I was an engineer in my first semester at Cornell. So I stumbled into the hotel program. That's because I've been working in restaurants since I'm 14 years old, and I realized my best buddy, who also went to Cornell, was in the hotel school, and I was like, you know what? These people seem a lot, more fun to hang out with, and it's pretty ironic that now I hang out with a bunch of engineers who are creating software, and maybe I should have stuck with the software side of things, but um yeah, I mean, I was always what you might have called there's hotel school students, which you could be called hoteliers, and there's the subsegment of us who love restaurants and food and wine and everything. And this concept of a foodie was something that I heard 25 years ago. And there were the hoteliers and the foodies, and that that phrase is now turned into every Instagram person. I'm a foodie. Yeah, I don't like it. It's not my thing anymore. But um, the point is I loved restaurants, and the thing that's addicting about restaurants is hospitality is selfish. Okay. Let me tell you, I love the high, the dopamine hit, whatever you want to call it, that I get off of making other people happy and maybe even anticipating their needs and doing things that they don't expect to be done for them, to them. The high that I get off that is it's unmatched and it's addictive. And frankly, I've wanted to stay in that space forever. And so it's made me love the world of restaurants, then get into restaurant technology. Why? Because my whole goal with restaurant tech has been pretty simple. I want to help restaurant operators use cutting edge technology to make their operations better so that more restaurants survive. Um, More restaurants can stick around. Restaurant operators are not the most tech savvy group of folks. That's probably not a far reaching statement. I think everybody knows that, and they're there for the art. But for me, I got to go work with Danny Meyer, who is arguably the best restaurateur of in the country and of our generation as well. Got to go Was working with him at Tabla during the early days of Shake Shack, so got to see kind of Shake Shack from its infancy. In fact, there's a funny story where I applied and two people had applied to basically be the opening GM of the Shake Shack, and it wasn't the opening GM, but it was like the GM position as they were creating it in the Shake Shack in Madison Square Park. And the other guy got the job, not me, which is a great learning lesson. He deserved it. He was way more qualified for it than I was. But I remember being like 3 minutes late to the interview, and and the person at the time, Paul Bose Bevan, who was kind of in charge of HR, he said, this is not why you're not getting this role, but you should consider that it is a part of it, right? Like, why were you a few minutes late to this interview? And I'm glad I didn't get that role, because I think it would have taken me on a different path, not in the tech side and the food tech side that I've been on. But it's an interesting sliding doors moment. Anyway, back to your question. Yeah, the things I've taken with me are how can you make restaurant operations easier and be fully guest focused? And it's might be ironic to hear somebody in restaurant technology saying that, but technology is here to help the P&L. It's not here to replace the hospitality.
All right, so I think the last thing you were saying, you had concluded the story that you were late. That was in part a consideration in the job. You're lucky that you ended up not going down that path. But I think what is interesting, maybe what happened following that event.
Yeah. Well, I already given the restaurant that I was working at, Tabla, notice that I actually gave them 3 or 4 months of notice saying I wanted to leave. I did not know what I was going to do next, and this is a good one. The head of a company called Avero, um, CEO of a company called Avero, I should say, came in and had lunch at Tabla at the restaurant I was working at. And the general manager of Tabla at the time, Terry Coughlin, bless his heart, was like, "You should go talk to him. You're so good at, like, the tech side of things and whatever." And it's like, I don't want to work for some tech company. And I was like, I don't want to, it's like POS crap or whatever. And I was in love with wine and like the beauty of service and all these other things. Um, and it was towards the end of his lunch, and Terry said to me, "Did you go over talk to Damien yet?" And I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Go talk to him." So I went over to talk to Damien. Damien said, "Why don't you just come in? I heard you're leaving. We can just do an interview, or whatever, just see what it's like." At the time, I was getting paid probably in the range of like 35, 40K a year, right? Restaurants don't pay a lot of money. That's not, again, not too far or hot of a take here. And I interviewed with Damien, and I think that they offered me, and I think they thought they were lowballing me. I think they offered me 80K at the time, and I was like, "All right, I can do tech for a little bit." After many years of just barely paying rent, I was like, "Okay, this will be great." But it was a really, again, this like lovely, fortunate decision. As I said before, I had a background where I thought I was going to be an engineer, so there was part of me that did love technology and math and the business side of restaurants, and Um, this this place Avero, I worked there for 8 years, and it gave me an incredible opportunity to go learn how to deal with restaurants and hotels, restaurants in casinos, restaurant chains, independent restaurants. And I really widened my network. I can remember this one thing. Very famous restaurateur Will Guidara, who I've become very close with over the years. I called him and said, Avero asked me if I'd like to go move to Las Vegas for a year. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And he said, well, look, if we looked at this, Facebook was like the hot, platform at the time. He said, we looked at this as like a Facebook, type of activity. If you go there, and let's say it's for 1 year, you'll make so many new contacts and so many new friends, and you'll open up so many new doors. And honestly, if you come back in a year, everything's going to be basically the same here. What are you going to lose friends here? No, just you're gone for a year. That's fine. And I'm grateful that he gave me that advice, because I did take him up on the offer, and now I have this whole group of friends and people from Las Vegas and contacts from even places as far as Los Angeles, where I spent a lot of time, where I know you are, because of doing that. So it really opened up that step to get into tech, and that another step to get into the West Coast. It just all kind of it all made sense. Like every part of my career made like very clear logical sense in the moment as to why I should do that next thing.
I think there's such an important lesson behind that, in that I think a lot of people want to change their life. A lot of people want to start a business. A lot of people want to go do that thing. And where they end up getting so caught up in how to do it and what to do and the negative components of doing it. But life reward action. Like life, the more action you get, the more you actually do, the greater the number of nodes out there that generate luck, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the greater the surface area of luck. And I sort of want to talk a little bit more about sort of taking that next step. One thing I keep going back to. So I do remember that you had studied engineering. You're different than a lot of engineers, though. Okay, and I'm sure there's engineers that'll be irritated by this comment. But it's no surprise. I went to school with a lot of engineers. Some of my closest friends are
Yeah.
engineers, but they tend not to be as gregarious as you are. You are an incredibly affable person. Where you're from,
Kind.
Brooklyn, right?
Yes, originally.
And you could really talk to anybody, even if they didn't want
I
to talk to you. They'd
Oh
somehow
man.
end up getting sucked into your vortex and your charisma. And I think there's a real power that comes from the Venn diagram overlap between an analytical engineering mind and the
Yeah.
ability to communicate effectively. And I think that's really, that nexus is, I think, really an important component. So translating a little bit of what you said about hospitality being selfish, it makes you happy, anticipating people's needs. This sort of seemed to give you a little bit of an angle to become the wizard behind the curtain, in
Yeah.
that to start directing the technology, and seeing that sort of inside loop where you're actually starting to get. And I want to dial this in a little bit more down the
Yeah.
road in what we're talking about, but understanding the consumer's needs sort of shortens the distance between where you are and finding the customer being happy,
Yeah.
right? Like, and if you start to aggregate that data and be able to be more effective at sort of identifying that, um, it's sort of a secret sauce, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
that's where the juice is. So I wonder,
Yeah.
I want you to go a little bit into sort of what that transition was from, you know, being at Avera, what you took from that, and where you thought, okay, let's put my own rubber to meet the road here. Like
Sure.
where do I take launch? How did this idea behind Byte start to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
born?
It's great. And there's one important step in between Avero and Byte, which was another, right place, right time type of thing. I got a phone call. I was actually in the midst of starting my own business. I thought I wanted to start my own business. I had this concept around reservations that I wanted to do and so forth. And I remember seeing a deck for this company called Resy. and I was like, oh shit, they're kind of doing some of the stuff that I want to do, or like this would be end up being competitive to what we do. By the way, during that time, I had met my wife, then girlfriend, then fiance, became my wife. And I remember she bought me this. She like bought a magnet for the fridge that said "Jump and the net will appear," and like that's just to go back to your point of putting yourself out there and taking action. Um, and by the way, surround yourself with people that will like that want you to take action. Like just fucking throw the haters out. You know what I mean? There's no room in life for that. And if people are, even if they're not haters, if they're people who just kind of bring negative energy in your space, and it sounds a little hippy dippy. I'm not that way, but I'm just saying there are negative people. Guess what? Get them out of here. You don't need them anyway. Back to the positive people, where my wife has encouraged me quite a bit to go do that next thing, because I was at a company for 7 years and I was kind of bored at that point. Um, and I saw this deck from Resy, and I was kind of excited about what they were up to. And I got a phone call, a lead, funny enough, that came into Avero, which was this guy, Mike Montero, the CTO of Resy, who was asking about point of sale integration. And I was like, let me take this. This is the guy, this is not for you. Or I forget who I said this to, but I was like, this is for me. So I spoke to Mike, and it was a funny conversation, because by the end of it, he was like, yeah, we were just thinking about it, just exploring. It's not that important. I was like, I should come in and meet you. And so I came in to meet him, and I told him at that point, like, hey, I'm interested in what you guys are up to, and that turned into me being the fourth employee at Resy. And I was, maybe like 48 hours later, I had met Gary Vaynerchuk, who was one of the co-founders of the company, met Ben, who was the CEO of the company, and I was bold enough to say to them at the time, I said, there's about 5 people in the country that could do this job well, and I was like, I'm one of the 5 people, so we should do this, because it's going to be very hard for you to figure out who the other 4 are. And I don't know if that went in my favor or not. I had an offer later that day. I basically accepted it in 24 hours, and again, it was this kind of like this beautiful moment. And by the way, going back to my earlier story, part of why I had the confidence to say that is because I went to the West Coast and I met the restaurateurs on the West Coast, and I knew who they were, and I was networked there. And I had, the backing of this beautiful Cornell hotelly world, right? And I had already spent the time learning about software as a service sales, SaaS sales, which at the time was like new, right? It was still, I think you would still get Microsoft versions, and it wasn't this like constantly updated like Microsoft Word that we have now. And I was confident when I said, yeah, it's me or 5 other people. And I knew who those 5 people were who could actually do this job well. I think it turned out pretty well. We did a pretty good job, 5 years into it, selling the company to Amex.
That's such an interesting story. So now you've got, I mean, tell me at least high level, what are some of the takeaways? I mean, these are two of the biggest names in the business, right? Between Danny Meyer and Gary
Yeah.
Vaynerchuk. What takeaways do you have working inside those
Oh man.
organizations in sort of understanding how they craft a culture?
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, so similar and so different. It's a really great question, because I know that Gary um, often has said, like, the way that Danny's crafted his organization, he wants to learn about, because they both are so special in what they've done. So Danny Meyer has crafted an organization that truly cares about the people in the organization more than any other place I've ever been, um, and that means both that idea of radical candor, where you care enough to tell somebody that what they're doing is not correct, but it comes from this beautiful place of empathy and love for that person, but also in a way that you care for every single person in the building. So whether you're walking in and walking past the prep cooks, you say hello. You don't say, hey, what's going on? You say, hey, Phil, how are you doing today, right? We had some of the most, it didn't matter if they were a dishwasher or a bus person. Every single person in the organization mattered, and you would be called out if you did not act in that same way. And I think there were so many powerful lessons that I learned during my time working at Union Square Hospitality Group. I had some people that had worked there for many years as my mentors. Terry Coughlin, I mentioned before, being one of them. And he knew every lesson that there was, so much so that during that same time was when Danny turned it into a book called Setting the Table. So everyone's gotten to learn some of Danny's lessons, but a couple of them that always have stuck out to me is one concept called ask the question before you say the thing. So somebody walks in late to their shift, right? There maybe a server walks in late to their shift, and you don't say, why were you late? You start with, hey, is everything all right? I noticed you're late today, but that's not like you. So is everything okay? Right. And what's surprising about that is what you do is you find out things about people and you find out who they are, and they know in that moment that you care about them rather than you're just a cog in a wheel, get to show up on time, and other people had to pick up your work. There was a time that happened, and a guy was unfortunately in like a biking accident on the way into work, and you could see that he was like disheveled on the way in. And I was like, you know what? Take a half hour, man. Like take your time to get ready. If you need a moment, we went to the store, got him new pants because his pants got ripped. It's those types of things that um, you will never learn in school. You will never learn in a book, but how to manage other people in a way that they know that you care about them. It's an unbelievable skill set. So ask the question before you say the thing. Trust but verify. Everyone uses this, but like conceptually, if you don't have that layer of trust um, established with your team because you care about them, then it's hard to verify without it feeling like micromanaging. Um, there's a gentleman by the name of Richard Carrain who ran Union Square Hospitality Group for a long time. I forget his official title, but he was like Danny's right hand forever. And he went through this incredible seminar called Welcome to Management. And this seminar was just like, hey, it's midnight, your last shift before you're going on a week-long vacation to Mexico, and somebody, there was a guest complaint where they had something hot spilled on them and whatever. Guess what? You got to write it up. Doesn't matter if it's midnight. You have to write it up from midnight to 1 a.m. It's going to take an hour to do it. Tough shit. Welcome to management. And it was this really like wonderful christening into the idea of you are where the buck stops. Like the buck stops with you. You can't leave anything to not be done well. And of course, that is essentially another Danny philosophy, which is being a 51 percenter, is what would you do if nobody's looking, right? Do you walk past the trash that's on the floor? Do you pick it up and dispose of it? Or, if the manager's not there, do you walk by the let's say the dishwasher and don't say hello on the way in? Or would you do that anyway if nobody was watching, right? And so those concepts, I think, are very much a part of the structure and kind of the management that I've learned there. Now, on Gary's side, such an interesting, different approach, and this is the time that I was within Gary's sphere. Resy was being incubated out of VaynerMedia, so we were in the VaynerMedia office. And let me tell you, I don't know if I've ever met as passionate of a group of people and ambitious as a group of people that worked at VaynerMedia. I mean, these folks would run through a brick wall for Gary, but not just for Gary, for the other people on their team. Um, and they all cared so much about um, putting in the time. Okay. I think that's not something you teach in the restaurant industry, because it's going to be 6 day work weeks and 100 hours a week, and that's kind of what you sign up for, these nights and weekends and all that other stuff. But when you have this kind of agency 9 to 5 world, Gary had a unique way of just telling people that hustle mattered, and he attracted people who understood that. And by the way, it also detracted others who probably didn't want to put in 100-hour weeks and did not want to stay there till 10 p.m. But we in Resy were there forever. We were there all day. We'd get in the morning and we'd be there till the last reservation was sat at 9:30. Because at the time we were doing a lot of manual stuff, but you could tell of the 400 people that were in that company, the 30 people that were left, all of them became wildly successful. And it wasn't by accident. It's because they cared. They were there late. They would, we'd turn on the music at about 8 o'clock, and, maybe people started to bring in some takeout or whatever. And it was just obvious who the people were that like cared, and they were in their early 20s, and they just hustled harder. They worked harder than anybody else in the room. And like, it's easy to jump on like the Kobe mentality thing, but I don't know, that stuff's addictive. And when your leader in Gary, is working twice as hard as you are, putting in twice as much time, it's the type of thing that becomes infectious in a really positive way.
So as you, I want to take this and segue into building Byte, right?
Hmm.
There's something that actually keeps reverberating through a number of other founders and leaders that I've spoken to. And so, not surprisingly, but I think there's a tendency within business to um, reduce the value of emotion. And what I mean by that, to counterpoint, is among these leaders, and I think you sort of hit the nail on the head with Danny about emotional intelligence. The
Yeah.
ability, actually, part of being a bigger person is actually shrinking yourself to some degree, which is instead of focusing on why that person was late and the impact to the bottom line of then and now, you sort of subordinate that thought to what is this person going through? How can I
Correct.
pull myself out of this equation and look at it from a broader perspective? And I think I'm just curious, that's just sort of a microcosm, but between that and sort of identifying passionate people who are faithful to a purpose, and in some ways, like, yes, I'm very curious about Gary's ability to attract that talent. And obviously, a lot of it is in his own leadership style. But when you
Hmm.
have that many people also pumping in that same velocity as you are expecting, it also raises his own accountability. He almost
Yes.
has to sort of continue to outperform to live up to the expectations of being a leader to those people. And I'm curious if you can take some of those experiences and what was so important in building the culture that you've created at Byte.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, it's interesting because the culture at Byte has been a couple of things along the path here. Um, First of all, COVID was crazy hard for us. Okay, people were afraid to touch, the shopping carts. Okay, never mind a shared touchscreen in a restaurant, and yet at the same time, there was a silver lining where everybody from grandparents down to the youngest of the young now understand how to digitally order. And so if they understand how to digitally order on a phone, you can do this on a kiosk, and it made things like self-service way more familiar to just the general population. So there was a silver linings, but at that time the culture was trying to keep the team together and keep us innovating and keeping us focused, even though we had not really found product market fit yet. In the past 6 months, I've really tried to actually emulate a little bit more of that, like Danny Meyer being in every restaurant and every night in the early days, Gary, working his ass off and taking every opportunity that he can to take meetings. I think you might call it this founder mode stuff. Even though technically I'm not a founder, but I should say that. I'm fortunate to have met the founders, and they brought me on very early and put me in the CEO chair. But the concept of founder mode to me has been really about trying to extend my light and my fire that I have as far reaching as it can go. It's not about micromanagement. It's not about, and it's also not, I don't know if you've spoken about this on the pod yet, but this concept of founder mode often gets juxtaposed with the concept of like hire great people and let them do their job. And I don't think either, like it doesn't need to be an either or. To me, this idea of founder mode is like I said, extending my fire, my light as far as it can go. Sometimes you use that fire to light somebody's butt so that they can get moving. Sometimes you use that fire to light the way. Sometimes you use that fire as a place where you create a campfire where everyone can get together and have a conversation, important conversations, whether it's the future of the product or the strategy that we're taking. And sometimes it's just handing that fire out, lighting somebody else's candle and saying, you take this over here. So, I've been trying to extend myself into as far reaching parts of the business as possible and doing wildly unsustainable things. So I have been on the road a ton, meeting with our customers. I think it's just such a pivotal moment for our business to understand if we're doing the right things. Like, obviously going to trade shows and customer trade shows and stuff like that, but also getting out of the way of other people. There was a woman in our organization, Leah Thomas, she's incredible. And she's somebody who I, more than anybody, want to just enable to do what she does best and then get out of her way. And, I think that's an important part of this like journey of leadership as well.
So I want to talk about COVID and and AI in the restaurant business,
Mm,
because I think you have such a unique insight into that. And I think just as consumers and the future of the industry, I'm curious how this plays out, especially
yeah,
within your organization. But um, here we are on the brink of Q4 2024, and in a large way, I mean, there's a number of things that have gone on elsewhere between geopolitical pressures and uh, economic pressures, and cost of capital, a number of things, right? But I think we're starting to see a lot more post-COVID ripple effect shake out now than we have maybe in 2023. Maybe it
sure.
was too close. And I think that's happening in our zeitgeist. I think it's happening in our conversations. I also think it's happening in business. I'm curious, post COVID, how do restaurants prepare themselves? How does your industry, how does your technology prepare against it? I mean, I think to a large degree we're individually more prepared for an environment like that because we've never been through it. But
Yeah.
and so maybe we don't face that turmoil with as much resistance. I don't know what that case may be, but on your side, how did
Yeah.
that impact how you guys did business and
Yeah. I
in
mean,
terms of incorporating it into the future?
yeah, look, I think for the restaurant industry, the long term effects of COVID are that all of a sudden, the people in the innovation seats, the CTO, the CIO, are now at the big kids table. Okay, something to the effect of between 10 and 25% of a restaurant's orders are typically now coming from out of the store in a digital format, um, with people like us putting our kiosks in tons and tons of national brands. There are more digital orders inside the store. The choices, the path that a guest takes to order your food, it's now going through these digital. So the CIO, the CTO, this chief marketing officer is now a part of the conversation. The COO is now part of the conversation, and everyone is not in this general position to reject technology, but they're saying, how can we use these things um, to improve our business? And that happened honestly throughout 2020 and 2021. That's when that happened to this business, because obviously in 2020, for a large majority of restaurants, everything was order ahead for a while. Okay, and um, that's been the change. And I think that we're finally getting around to what I like to call digital guest experience, and the concept that your experience that your customers are going through is a digital one, and it has to be infused with hospitality. So going back to the Shack thing, it's great to have a kiosk. You're helping to supplement labor costs. You're meeting people where they are, giving them the time that they want to order and explore a new menu, but also you can give them fun, and you can do something that is really hard to do if you're just a cashier. Even the concept of surprise and delight, we're building this into our product, which is another kind of hospitality feature. The idea that we can randomize when somebody gets a free coffee or a free cookie along with their meal. It's something that's really hard to do as a cashier, to say, okay, every 100th order I might just give something away. I know Cozy used to have a great program with this where they empowered their cashier team to give away coffee if somebody came in and just ordered a coffee. Hey, this one's on us, and just give you a coffee cup. Um, that's happened to me a couple times, and it was very memorable. We can do this much easier digitally than you can with somebody.
Sure. So how about AI's role in hospitality in the restaurant industry? And then sort of underscore that through sort of dynamic pricing, because
Oh
between those
God.
two things, that creates what I would consider, I mean, by all objective standards, that's the perfect juncture of supply and demand, right? But as a
Mm,
consumer, there is a feeling that that could become manipulative.
look, I did a bunch of research on um, dynamic pricing, or which way we want to call this, restaurant revenue management. I actually took at Cornell. I took a graduate course with it was called Restaurant Revenue Management with Professor Sherry Kives. This is all those decades ago when we went to school, right? Again, not mentioning how many. I think our college degrees can drink, by the way, just so you know. They're legal now. Um, so uh, this concept of dynamic pricing, I think first of all, it's a kind of a sexy topic to talk about on a grand scale. And I think the reality is that it's in its infancy. Okay, so we still have a lot of uh, you know path to go down, but here's the thing that doesn't make sense to me, or the research that I did, the conclusions that I've drawn, is the larger scale something happens, the more unlikely it's that consumers will be able to accept pricing, any pricing dynamics with it. And so I kind of went through all these categories, like let's just take travel, because the travel is the one. Well, airlines are differently priced and hotel rooms are differently priced. And yeah, that is definitely true. But as you start getting into other segments of travel, I thought about airlines, of course, dynamically priced. You have a different price for this seat versus that. That makes sense, blah, blah, blah. And consumers have accepted it. Well, it's kind of on the high end of luxury. We don't want to necessarily say that, but it is. Like there are people that can't afford to fly places and don't fly for business and blah blah blah. It's a luxury good, flying. So if you drop it down to, let's say, a regional train going, like an Amtrak going from New York to Boston, they do some dynamic pricing, but it's really kind of more like tiers, like tier 1, tier 2. Certainly they have like a business class and a not business class, but generally speaking, the New York to Boston Amtrak is going to be the same price. What about a regional train? Regional trains have off peak and peak, usually, right? Getting commuting people into the, and then let's go down to the subway. Now, we've went from the smallest subset of people to larger to, or larger, larger, right? Now let's go to the New York City subway. Let me tell you what would happen if you tried to dynamically price the New York City subway. The whole city would be burnt down. And it should be, because people rely on this to get to work. They rely on it to pick up their kids from school. And so when you get down to a certain level of broad based application of something, the dynamic pricing argument doesn't work. Now, if you put this into food, sure, market price for lobster makes sense, or a variable tasting menu that costs more on a Friday than it does on a Monday via a reservation at Talk. What's up, Matt Tucker? Um, that makes sense. Even if you go down to, let's say, happy hour, okay? Again, not everybody's able to go out and have drinks on a Friday afternoon after work, but if you can, you pay a little bit less because it's in the happy hour and you're probably ordering more food. There's a dynamic there that makes sense. But if you get down to like McDonald's cheeseburgers and French fries being a different price on Monday and a different price on Friday, there's something that doesn't connect to me. And I think it starts to erode trust. It starts to erode guest experience. And so I'm, in a weird way, I'm okay with it at certain levels of luxury, but I'm not okay with it when you get down to the most basic basic kind of levels of cuisine, and like the most simple, the most widely used levels of cuisine at the QSR level. Dynamic pricing doesn't make as much sense to me, and I understand why consumers don't have rejected it so far.
Good answer. What are you seeing successful restaurants doing as it relates to integrating technology? What are the ones that are using
Yeah.
it better? How are they using it better, and what is that translating to?
Yeah, I mean, this is an easy one. Any restaurant CEO that's talking about getting to 100% digital is in the right place. Okay. As I mentioned before, digital transactions is just such a bigger world that we can do things in. Okay, you can randomize happiness. You can you can reward people on a different level. You can recognize people. You can have fun. And so Byte's a part of that. But moreover, there's a very interesting thing on the back end for people who want to be recognized in these restaurants and want to be known, even though they don't want to necessarily be a part of, let's say, a loyalty program and download an app or do. There's many other ways with an opt-in from a guest that you can start to connect who this person is. And the more that a restaurant that has positive intentions, right? There are some that maybe don't, but there are most restaurants that we work, every restaurant we work with, most restaurants that I've experienced my whole life, the end goal here is to make somebody happy and to feed them. Okay. And so if you start with that premise, the easiest way for me to make somebody happy is to know more things about them. You know, you mentioned before this idea of communicating and I mentioned anticipating people's needs, and you were saying communicating. And I used to view walking around a fine dining restaurant as this like interesting psychological study by just viewing somebody's face or four people's face at a table for that split second that you walk past them. You have to make a deduction as to like, do they need anything? If they are they happy? If they're not happy, is it because of us? Is it because of their conversation? Is this the right time to go over and approach them? Is it not? I mean, there's so many things that happen in that blink, in that moment. Um, and and the more you would know about a regular, oh, that's just Jimmy and Sally. They're always, you know, chirping at each other over dinner. The more you can know about people, the more likely it is you're going to give them a better service experience. And the same thing goes at the QSR and fast casual level, where we're kind of talking about these bigger restaurant brands. If they were able to know that you were vegan because they had that information about you, they will be able to serve you better. They will be able to give you options that are vegan options. I was having a great conversation with a really beverage focused, like a juice brand. Okay, and you know, folks that frequent juice locations often have certain dietary needs. They might be trying to gain muscle, or they might be trying to lose weight and things like that. And the person who I was talking to was a cashier at one of these restaurants, and she was saying how that's a very hard conversation for her to have, because it's almost like asking a little bit too much information on the first time you meet. They just walked into your restaurant. Now you're saying, "Hey, you want to lose weight?" Like, wait, what, do I need to lose weight? You know, like, so it's a much easier conversation to be had digitally. So there's all these different ways that the CEOs that are saying, "I want to get to 100% digital ordering, 100% digital ordering." It's really with the intent to serve the guests the best way that they can.
That's really good feedback. So, um, quick question, which you can dodge. But personally, I've noticed tipping has become a lot more expectant in certain circumstances where it wasn't traditionally before
Yeah.
COVID. You have any comment on that?
It's funny. It's very apropos. Um, I actually, so look, I think that the way that inflation's gone in the country, everyone probably feels that their wallet is not extending as far as it used to. Okay, so the reality is, if you have the opportunity to tip, and it's something that you can do and want to do, hospitality workers will accept those tips. They work their ass off. That is a 100% bona fide fact. They work hard, but no hospitality worker is going to, you know, give a different level of service. Tipping happens after the fact. It happens after you give the service. So they're not going to be giving you a different level of service if you are not somebody who can tip in these newer tipped situations. I think the traditional situations of a table service waiter and a team that's around you giving you service throughout a meal, maybe throughout a half hour to 45 minute to hour experience, that is worthy of a tipped, uh, anybody who's not giving a tip in those environments, or either is not educated on how it's done here in America, or probably has never worked in hospitality. But in the scenarios where it's like a fast casual, where somebody might have just, you know, put together your burrito and handed it to you, and you know, you don't have the ability to tip that day, that's okay. You know, I don't think that that is something that has become a mandate in the same way. And just giving people an opportunity to tip, we see tips go up in restaurants by giving people an opportunity to, and it's not a mandate. So I don't know if there's like pressure put on the consumer. I hope that that's not the case. But I do definitely know that hospitality workers work really hard.
Yeah, that's great feedback. I know we got to wrap up soon, so I'm going to
Yeah.
start with a couple of the closeout questions I like to ask, which is, as the master of your own destiny, what does your day look like? How do you structure your day to maximize we can get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, in the morning prior to the kids getting on the bus, it's kid time. I do wake up, probably check my email right away, but I try to stay off my phone when I'm around the kids. Get the kids to the bus, and lately I've been hitting the gym, trying to lose weight myself. I have a nice bet with somebody in the business to lose some pounds. So, and I do think it gives you a bit of energy, throughout your day. And then I'm on the phone. I try to spend as much as my time talking to my team. If I'm spending time not talking to the team or talking to customers, I'm not using my powers or my strengths. I love a spreadsheet, but there are other people who are better at that than I am. I love marketing, messaging. There are many other people who are better at that than I am. I want to hear and understand what people need, both inside and outside of my organization, and then try to put the plans in place to do those things.
Great feedback. And last is what's feeding your mental diet? What podcast,
Oh yeah.
books? What are you reading? What are you watching?
This has probably been said before, and it does get on an annoying level, but the All In podcast is outstanding.
You're not the
It
first
really
person.
is. Yeah, of course. And I've encouraged, I've encouraged everybody in my organization to listen to this because there's like geopolitics that's involved. There's national politics. It gets preachy, and I don't know if we should all be taking advice from billionaires in general because they just have a different perspective on the world than the average Joe. And but yet at the same time, there are nuggets of the future that I think they see through via their access that help me to say, oh, this might be where the world goes. Again, not politically, but like where AI goes, right? A lot of my AI opinions can start to be informed around stuff like the All in Pod. So they do a great job.
So where can people get a hold of you, and who would you want to hear from if they do reach out?
Find me on LinkedIn. Find me on Brandon at getbyte.com. I'll give out my email address. That's fine. If you ever want to jam, shoot me a note. Hopefully I have some time. Would love if restaurant operators out there listening to this, franchisees listening to this, and you haven't tested kiosk yet, I think you should. You should give it a try and see if that's something that could help you, become more profitable.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. It was great to see
All
you.
right.
Thank you for your time.
You as well, man.